So I picked up the iPhone 14 Pro the day it came out last Friday. I've always been in the camp of iPhone cameras, phone cameras in general, will absolutely never surpass or even catch up to the quality of a professional grade camera. That being said, after using this extensively for the last week, it's made me kind of reconsider some of my feelings toward that statement. I've been thoroughly impressed with the quality of the iPhone 14 Pro camera. Apple always says that this is their best phone yet, and they've been saying that for many years. But I've only seen incremental changes in the quality of the camera from the last 4 iPhones. But going from the iPhone 13 Pro to the 14 Pro, in my opinion, has been the biggest leap in camera quality that we've seen in years. When I picked up my phone the day it released last week, not 12 hours later, I had a wedding that I needed to go to on the Oregon coast. I left my home in Utah that Saturday morning, drove about 6 hours, slept somewhere in the middle of Nevada overnight, and then I made it to Samuel H. Boardman State Park just before sunset on Saturday. As I had a few days before the actual wedding, I saw it as a perfect opportunity to put this camera to the test and see what it can really do. So one thing I want to note, and I'm not sure if this is a bug or if it's really just underexposing the RAW photograph, but when I make a photo with the iPhone 14 Pro in ProRAW and import it into Lightroom, obviously it imports it as a DNG, it's incredibly underexposed. For example, take a look at this photo. So it clearly exposed for the highlights because the sky looks very well exposed, but you can't see any detail in the shadows or that lower half of the photograph. But when we just look in the Photos app at the JPEG itself, it's very well exposed, it has great dynamic range, and you can see all of the detail. So what I think is going on here is the iPhone is doing some sort of minor adjustments to the JPEG after it's created that RAW, so that obviously, people can just take a photo and just send it to friends and family without having to edit it, because obviously the RAW is just incredibly underexposed. And this may be a bug because it's really underexposed. I have to bring the exposure up about 2 stops and the shadows up a long way as well. Or it could just be that the shadow retention is just much better than the highlight retention, which is why it underexposes the RAW so much. So here's the before, and then here's the after. And as you can see, it's just incredible how much detail is stored in those shadows, and you couldn't even see them in that RAW image. The highlights are still very well balanced, and if we zoom in, you can really see those 48 megapixels shine, as there's still so much detail at 100% crop. And the great thing about this is there's really not much degradation in the quality, even though we've pushed the shadows so much and increased the exposure by 2 stops. Thoroughly impressed with the low light performance of the iPhone 14 Pro. One thing that impressed me the most of the iPhone 14 Pro camera on this trip is just the detail retention of these actual photos in very dynamic scenes. The only kind of situations that I've used my iPhone in the past is when I've made some photos here in my office for Instagram. I have complete control of the light. I can change these lights on the back of the desk. I can move my big light if I want to. So I can really make the scene to be exactly how I want it to be. Whereas the Oregon coast was incredibly dynamic. We had high contrast scenes with sunbeams coming through trees and sea mist kind of creating this really nice fog. And all of those things that are completely out of the photographer's control really pushed this sensor to its limits. Here is a side-by-side comparison of a photo I made with my iPhone 14 Pro and my A7 IV. Feel free to pause this video, take a long look at each of these photos, and have a guess which one you think was made with my A7 IV or the iPhone 14 Pro. And what really interested me the most is that on this trip, although I had made a conscious effort to use the iPhone 14 Pro more frequently than one of my cameras, I just found myself pulling out my phone from my pocket much more frequently than either of my cameras. And that's mainly because I was confident that I could bring that RAW photograph into Lightroom and create something that I was very pleased with from that RAW image. Now, as I mentioned, the main reason why I went to the Oregon coast is because my best friend got married on Cannon Beach. It was just an absolute wonderful event. I was honored to be their officiant for that wedding, so it was a wonderful occasion for me as well, not only to witness them get married, but to be able to participate and perform that ceremony for them. As it was a wedding, I obviously had to snap a few photos after the ceremony with my iPhone, and these photos just completely blew my mind. Now, I'm not a portrait photographer, I don't shoot weddings, so I'm not the best in this kind of field. So I have two photographs here, one with the ultra wide lens and one with the wide lens. Now, bear in mind that the ultra wide lens is only 12 megapixels and the wide lens is the one that is 48 megapixels. Now, I mentioned that because I've mainly just been using the wide lens, which is 48 megapixels, but the ultra wide has had some significant upgrades as well. Side by side, these photos look exactly the same in terms of quality and rendering and the depth that it provides. But I'm just going to zoom in and just look at the detail at 100% zoom on that 48 megapixel photo. I was absolutely stunned when I edited it in Lightroom. Just blown away with the quality. There's no real pixelation, there's nothing weird going on, no artifacts that you generally see on a phone camera. I honestly think it could pass as a photo made by a professional grade camera if they were side by side. Now, I'm not saying you need to forget about buying a professional grade camera if you want to get into wedding photography and just pick up an iPhone, but it's interesting to see the quality and power that you have just in your pocket. People often say that the best camera you have is the one that's with you, and that definitely applies to the new iPhone 14 Pro. You know, if you're just posting on social media, obviously those photos aren't going to be blown up to billboard size quality or prints like the one behind me. The iPhone 14 Pro is going to do incredibly well in that kind of element if it's just for social media photos. I'm going to show one last photograph, and this was the first one when I actually zoomed in to really see the detail in this new 48 megapixel sensor, and my mind was just absolutely blown away. And I'm going to go to 100% crop, and you can see that the detail, you can see the logo on the camera just incredibly well. It doesn't even look like it's been cropped. It looks like an actual photograph shot in a macro mode. The quality just absolutely blew my mind, which just goes to show how far Apple have come with their cameras. This truly is their best phone yet, and I know it's just kind of buzzwords, but I definitely stand behind that statement because the leap from the 13 Pro to the 14 Pro, in my opinion, as I mentioned before, has just been the biggest leap that we've seen in an iPhone camera in years. So, who is the iPhone 14 Pro for? I've always had an iPhone myself. I've tried Android before and I just really can't do it. My entire family has an iPhone, and obviously I live in America and most of my family live in the United Kingdom. So being able to have iMessage and FaceTime to catch up is just very beneficial for me. But in terms of creating media, the iPhone is an incredible tool to add to your kit. There are some people who just use an iPhone for their media creation, but everyone is different. And for myself, obviously I need the cameras that I have for my day job, and obviously I do landscape photography as well. I don't think that an iPhone can replace a camera in any form of photography, whether it be weddings, landscape, or product photography, but it does have its place in a content creator's toolkit. This is just my review as a landscape photographer for the camera in terms of photos. I will be doing a later review of how well this performs in terms of video, but I can tell you right now, from my experience so far, and it could change when that review comes out, the leap from the 13 Pro to the 14 Pro in terms of video has been nowhere near significant as it has for photos. I think where I'll see improvements the most is probably low light and image stabilization. So definitely hit the bell notification so you can stay up to date on when that video will be dropping. And that's pretty much it for my review of the iPhone 14 Pro. Definitely very happy with this purchase. I've been blown away with its camera quality. I think in summary, it's just absolutely fantastic. Definitely consider upgrading if you have anything lower than the 13 Pro. If you have the 13 Pro, then you might want to do a little bit more research. But if you use your phone for photos significantly, then you really can't go wrong. The quality is just absolutely superb. If you have any questions about the iPhone 14 Pro or anything that you've seen in this video or what you want to see in my review of the video quality of the 14 Pro, just drop a comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. As always, be sure to follow me on Instagram at jromes.tech, and until next time, I'll see you later.